Starting this testimony has given me so much fear, honestly. Like, is this the devil? Is this the devil? Hi, I'm Natalie, and right before recording this call, I was about to put on makeup because in the morning I got up, I went to church, I did all of these different things throughout the day. The point being, I was about to put on makeup, and God told me, come as you are. Don't try to be anything you're not. Just come as you are. And so that's exactly what I'm doing. That's why I'm sitting in my bed. That's why I'm just going to talk. Honestly, talk about my life, talk about the things I've been through and how I found Jesus. And so this is actually something I've had a lot of internal conflict about posting, mainly because I'm not the cookie cutter Christian. Literally like 3 years ago, I had blue hair and a septum and I was selling crystals on the internet, saying stuff about spirituality. Like, that is who I was. Buckle in. Because honestly, all of the things I've been through, there's been so many spiritual synchronicities in my life that cannot be explained except for Jesus. It's God. Like, that's just what it is. And I was praying to God a couple of weeks ago saying, I don't really know what to say. If I'm going to do a testimony, what do I talk about? I'm too scared. I don't feel like I'm fit for this, is essentially what the prayer was. I was asking God to get rid of my fear. And he guided me to Jeremiah chapter 1. This is when God came to Jeremiah and told him to be a prophet. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. Jeremiah responded, Alas, sovereign Lord, I do not know how to speak. I'm too young. But the Lord said to me, Do not say I'm too young. You must go to everyone I send you to and say whatever I command you. Do not be afraid of them, for I am with you and I will rescue you. That was enough confirmation I needed that no matter what comes out of my mouth today and what I share, I know someone needs to hear it out there. I don't know about you, but God was weaponized in my family growing up. Okay, so we went to church, but only once in a while. But somehow God was always brought up in the conversation of the choices in my life or who I should and shouldn't be. And honestly, a lot of people who claimed to be Christian in my life were just plain out hypocrites. Being a Christian doesn't make me a good person. And I say that because, yes, reading the Bible and following God and trusting in Him has allowed me to be a better person, but inherently humans are flawed in nature. Our ego is self-centered and confirms whatever we've been taught. Until we are aware of whatever beliefs have been ingrained in us, there's no way for us to identify if it is of God or of the devil, in a sense, because not all thoughts that are planted are of God. Some things are planted and they're weeds. It looks the exact same as the plant, but it's a weed. And my pastor of my church really went over that concept in detail, and I genuinely enjoyed that. So if you guys want to see that sermon, go to the link in my description, because it's also been really difficult for me to find a church that I resonate with, because I don't believe in a form of Christianity where judging someone based on their politics or how holy they look is, I don't know, it just doesn't ever seem right to me. And that is what kind of made me stray away from Christianity for so long, personally. I always believed in some form of God, but I never fully believed in Jesus until now. And I'm going to tell you the story of how I started to be a believer, what God and Jesus has done in my life, and you can take with that what you will. I'm not going to try to convert you. I'm not going to say what you should or shouldn't do. I'm not going to preach to you. I'm just going to share with you my story. And it's taken me time to make that decision to be baptized and know that it's the right decision. I often preach on my own channel. You shouldn't overshare on the internet, right? Don't overshare to people your past mistakes. That is one thing I've said in multiple different videos of mine. But in a sense, I feel like it's dehumanized me. Like, I don't know. I feel like I've been looking at my content in a different light as of recently, and I just haven't been resonating with some of the things I used to say, and I think it's genuinely because I'm now in a closer relationship to God. And in the Bible, it says repeatedly, do not judge. And I think the reason I thought those things was because I was judging and critiquing myself so harshly for my past mistakes that I wasn't able to mend my own relationship to myself and God until I allowed God in. I rejected God for the longest time, but I had to ask, is that me, or is it just what I've been taught in order to escape from who I am? Escape from the pain I was experiencing, try to rationalize the different things I've been through. And so here's just some things that have brought me back to God. Going all the way back, let's talk about how I grew up. My parents divorced when I was 3 years old, and both of my parents were in my life, but both of them talked very, very badly about each other. Both of them remarried or dated, and they had a lot of people coming in and out of my life that I didn't necessarily like. For the most part, I lived with my grandparents when I was with my mother, and when I was with my father, it was mainly my dad and my stepmom. I'm not gonna go too deep into the family trauma because I don't think that's the point, but for someone out there who has dealt with a similar situation of having religion or God being weaponized against them, this is just what it did to me. So my mother was a little bit financially irresponsible. I ended up moving to my dad's and living with my dad and my stepmom for a while. As soon as I decided to move and live with my dad when I was around 13, 14, my mom married someone and moved to a completely different state. She just got up and left. There was this very big theme of abandonment, either emotional abandonment, physical abandonment. Betrayal is a big thing. And it took me a lot of time to work through in my own life of how to deal with that type of betrayal. I'm still in very close contact with my family, and I love my family very much. And we've talked about the things that have shaped my life, but there's only so much you can talk about because they have a different outlook on certain events. And sometimes you just don't want to go into those conversations because a lot of people in my life have a victim mindset where they replay certain things that have happened and will use me as the scapegoat. My stepmom at the time was very into New Age spirituality. She was a tarot reader, she did witchcraft, and so this kind of normalized that for me personally, and I don't really hate people who do those type of things, but I do believe it opens you up to a completely different type of energy, and I'll get more into that later. She didn't really know my mom, but she started seeing patterns in me that was like my mom. Mind you, my mom just like up and moved, right? So she would kind of be like, okay, you're acting like your mom, and kind of like weaponize that. So I did not have any type of sense of what a good mother figure was because a lot of the female figures in my life were very emotionally manipulative. And so naturally, I kind of picked up those qualities. And this is why in certain videos I talk about how narcissism is a trait you pick up from your environment. And if you don't become aware of it, it will inevitably lead to you having that victim mindset because I've dealt with a lot of different narcissists in my life. I wouldn't go as far to say that they are narcissists, but they just have a distorted sense of reality and it centers around victimhood. I just don't like using that word because I feel like it has been overplayed and it just means bad person nowadays, but actual narcissism is a psychological disorder. And so my stepmother was more covert in her narcissistic tendencies. And so these things were just happening and I didn't necessarily understand how to deal with them. I started to, how do I say this? Use scissors on my skin at a very young age. I don't really know how to say this without really like getting it taken down, but essentially I had thoughts of unalivement. I was extremely depressed. And around this time, I was about 16 years old, I got into my first serious relationship. I remember my one friend at the time was saying that he was not right for me because he was failing all of his classes and he was a burnout, and I didn't care at that point. He got me involved in things that I didn't think I would be involved in. Basically, the devil's lettuce, if you will. Drinking, experimentation with other things, and I'm not really gonna go into that part just for my own safety and security. If you guys ever wanted a Patreon or something where I do the uncut version of these stories, let me know. But to protect me and for my future children's sake, I'm just not gonna go deep into certain things I've done. But I was really young, sneaking out, being a really, really bad kid. And around this time was when COVID happened. The lockdown happened, right? And my dad and my stepmom split up. So my dad would be at work, and I remember we moved into an apartment, and so it would just be like me and my dad. Literally every single time that my dad left for work, all I had to do was Zoom calls, right? For my classes. I would literally just invite my boyfriend over and we'd spark up, we would do all these things, and it would just be, that's how it was, right? Slowly but surely I got more and more isolated in this relationship, and I remember one night praying to God, please get me out of this relationship. I don't know what to do anymore. And I got no answers. I really didn't know who to go to at this time. All of my friends that I think I had like one other friend. She was doing even more serious stuff than I was doing. But in no way did I see God in my life, because my environment was filled with sin. And so I started making TikTok videos, and this is so silly, but it's part of the story. And so I started making TikTok videos of high school advice. This was my outlet. And I forgot to mention too, but when I was younger, I also had an outlet, which was YouTube. So YouTube has been something that's been a huge part in my life. Social media, YouTube in general. It caused a hyperfixation of myself. This turned into the very narcissism I was trying to break out of with my own family trauma patterns. If you have a narcissistic parent, right, you'll notice that the cycle goes narcissist, empath. It kind of skips a generation. And that is what I felt like was going on. But I was experiencing two sides of the same exact coin. On one hand, I was an extreme people pleaser. I would do everything in order to make people like me, and that trickled into every single aspect of my relationship. I was extremely codependent. In fact, before my dad and my stepmom actually fully split, my stepmom was trying to get me like an official diagnosis for BPD, but that never ended up happening because I was 17 years old. And that was also kind of like a weaponization thing as well, because we got in this huge fight and I was trying to unalive. But anyways, this story isn't going to be cookie cutter at all, and that's because it's my life, and I don't want to sugarcoat any of that. I just want to be complete, raw, and honest with you guys, so that's what you're getting. TikTok made me a better person because it gave me something to tell people. I remember I'm making high school advice videos. This is what to do at a high school dance. This is how you make friends in high school. And I would give advice that I wish I knew in high school, because honestly, I was extremely isolated. I just remember feeling very confused. Like growing up, I don't know, that's the only thing I can really describe it as. Confusion, isolation, mental distortion even. At 17 years old, I ended up gaining 500,000 followers on my TikTok account. And I remember I would just refresh my views. Mind you, this is COVID, so this was like the only thing I cared about. I literally did not care about school. I did not have a desire to go to college. I just didn't care. And that might sound really dramatic, but that was the genuine truth. I remember I reconnected with my online friends and I decided to move out with them. And the reason I did that was because I was in such an isolated spot in the relationship I was in that all I wanted was friends. The COVID restrictions were finally lifting a little bit. So I was like, okay, well, would I rather go to a community college in my area, or would I rather go to a community college somewhere else and actually live the college experience? In all actuality, I just didn't want to be with that man. Like, I did not want to be with that man, but I didn't have the strength in order to break up with him and stay in the same exact city because I was so extremely codependent at the time and I didn't really know how to get out of the relationship. And, if I had the awareness at that time, I totally would have, but I just wasn't strong enough, honestly. And that's not saying that this man did anything like horrible to me. I'm not going to put that out on him in the relationship, but we were definitely very toxic for one another. And because of this, we really didn't have good outlets and we would end up hanging out way too much and basically involving each other in our emotions way too much. So I move out under the impression that me and my online friends are going to be making YouTube videos together. It's kind of going to be like a content house. We all used to make videos together, so we all had similar interests. And so I genuinely was like, these people are my friends, right? I move out and I immediately feel isolated again because they ended up starting to exclude me from things. And that feeling of just being excluded and not understood or cared for, or feeling like the care that I give other people was just blatantly pushed aside, it just opened up a whole different can of worms for me, and it sent me to another spiral. In order to move out, I sold my car because, again, I was working from a young age as well. Like, as soon as I turned 16, I got a job. I was just saving money because I really, really did not want to go to college in my hometown. Like, I don't know why, but that's just how I felt, right? So I sold my car because the college town I moved to had really good public transportation, and all of my other roommates had cars. So they told me, don't worry about it. It's not that big of a deal. And so my dad was like, cool, go for it. I tried to grow my YouTube, my TikTok at the same exact time. I was spending the money in my savings account, and that money was being spent up very, very fast because Southern California rent is not easy. Even though I was sharing a room, it was still really expensive to just live and exist. And I was 18 years old. I didn't really know what I know now. So that's what happened. And there's so many mini stories within that big, huge story. So if you guys want more from that period of my life, I have so many. But a specific thing I want to talk about is Moldavite. For those of you who don't know what Moldavite is, it is a tektite that was formed from an asteroid hitting Earth about literally like 30 billion years ago or something crazy like that. I don't know the exact number, but essentially it's a rare stone that is said to completely tear your life apart, right? Whatever is not meant for you will fall apart if you get this crystal. I don't believe in Moldavite. I believe in God. But during that time, that was the only thing I could latch onto to give a reason for why all of these crazy things were happening in my life. It was almost like a spiritual psychosis in a way. Mild version of spiritual psychosis. I don't think I was fully there, but I was definitely on the brink of a massive mental breakdown. And I realized, like, I've been searching for acceptance my entire fucking life through means that I don't even like. Like, I don't even with substance like that, but when it comes to pleasing other people, I would constantly just be like, yeah, like, I'm this person, yeah, I can fucking hang. No, you can't. No, you fucking can't. You want to be at home in your room journaling to yourself, but you're trying to show this fake facade on the internet to your friends, to your family. I think it was just a really big wake-up call of, like, my whole entire life, I have never felt secure in myself. And the only thing that really got me out of that period of my life was the Lord. And not in the sense of, oh, all of a sudden I started reading the Bible. Because I wasn't at that point yet in my spiritual development. Me and one of my roommates at the time started selling crystals. So we started doing business together, and we specifically created a Moldavite jewelry line. And the way we got that Moldavite is a story in of itself. But to sum it up, we met this guy at a gem fair, and he was one of the vendors there. He was this older businessman, right? At the time, we think he's a millionaire. And I think he might be, I don't really know, but he had so much merchandise. We end up working for this guy at the gem fair. One thing leads to another, and we end up getting product from him. And at this point, I think this is a sign from God. Like, I'm supposed to sell Moldavite. This is my calling. One thing leads to another, and I have a huge falling out with my business partner and roommates. And honestly, that was both of our callings, because she ended up finding Jesus as well, which I later found out. And I'm so grateful that she did, because honestly, that entire experience for the both of us, like, when I tell you that was also my best friend, that was one of the hardest falling outs I've ever had, because we were just way too interconnected. But the spiritual side of it was God had me. And when I tell you God had me, the way everything happened was like synchronicity after synchronicity. It felt like I was in the right place at the right time, but simultaneously, the entire thing was wrong. God will put you in situations to teach you, and then he will break it down so that you can rebuild. And that was one of my biggest breaking down moments where I had to rebuild on my own, find out exactly who I was. The whole discrepancy with my business partner is the money, right? We didn't really agree on how much money was whose. In order to basically continue living with her and making money, I wouldn't have been able to actually pay rent. I literally just, it wouldn't have happened. And so I had to move back to my hometown, broke, no car, indebted to this businessman because I sold his product, and so I had to send him back the product. Luckily, I didn't get in debt, but it was one of those moments where I was hit with reality. And I want to do an entire video more about that story time because it's not the main focus of today's video. This is just what led me to God, and that was one of those experiences that truly did lead me to God. If I had an hour or 5 hours to record every single little piece of it, I absolutely would. But I want to see if there's an actual audience for it. So just let me know down in the comments, whatever you guys want. When I got back home after this first failed business experience, I was so extremely depressed. Like, I genuinely was so depressed, but I didn't want to die, but I was really, really depressed. Have you guys ever been there? I was questioning spirituality. I was questioning God. I was questioning what life even meant. Like, I have my journal here from that time frame. This is from June 7th of 2022. I said, I moved to outrun a certain narrative about my life. This started from the time I was young, feeling excluded and turning to the internet. The only place I found a sense of belonging was through my creation, which nobody understood and would use as leverage. I began defining my worth through numbers since a really young age. And when I hit 500,000 followers, I believed what would elevate me was getting away from everything I previously defined myself as. Don't base who you are on the relationships around you. Honor your needs. What you need might not be what someone else does, and that's okay. Appreciate where you are now rather than seeking out future possibilities. And so I just thought that was really cute to look back on. A lot of people I knew were very concerned about me. Like, I remember getting so many texts being like, are you okay? Because the content I was posting at that time was very out of touch, and that was because I was not okay. Like, I was absolutely not okay. I was in one of the worst mental states I ever have been in. And the people around me, it just felt like they were judging me. I was so broke and I was looking for a job because I needed money. Like, at the end of the day, like, I've always been the type of person where if I'm down bad, I do not care. How do I get money? And so what I did was I went back to my first ever job. That job was the only one in walking distance from me and my dad's apartment at the time. So I remember when I asked my boss to hire me again, she was like, so what happened when you moved out? Like, what happened? Why are you back? And I just didn't even know how to tell her because so many things happened and I was publicizing all of it on the internet. And that's why I got that safety mechanism of like, I shouldn't share anything on the internet. So I got my first ever job back and I ended up going back to my ex. And that's a different story too, shoot girl, but that's why I talk about self-sabotage a lot, because I've done it before. And I think a lot of my content really centers around this idea that we are all so human, and oftentimes the things that we think will make us feel better are actually to our detriment, and we won't necessarily have the awareness to know that. It was the only place I found for comfort because I felt like nobody understood me. Some of you might relate, some of you might not, but at this time, my reality was reflecting back to me what was inside. God was still protecting me through that moment. And the reason I still didn't believe in God was because I was more so viewing it in a universal sense. Like, I believed in the universe. Like, I would have little feelings come up where I would just be like, oh my God, like, the universe is with me. Like, I don't know, 222 444. Like, I was spiritual girly down. And some of you might still be that way, and that's completely okay. I think that's still a valid form of connecting. But the only thing that will truly fulfill you is to have a relationship with God. And I didn't have a relationship with God. I just felt supported by him in this weird way, but I felt shamed by him. But when you truly start to get to know God and just go to him at times of weakness, he will give you relief because you are the only one that's separating yourself from God. He's always there. Throughout all of these things I went through, he was there. And the reason I say that is because something happened. I worked at this job for around 6 months, and it was January of 2023. I was mid-shift, and I just got this urge that I needed to call my Oma. My Oma is my grandma. I had this urge that I need to call my Oma right now. So I go and I call my Oma, and they have a house phone, so it's only the landline. My Opa picks up the phone, and he answers, and he's just like, Oma just fainted. She's on the way to the hospital right now. Go tell the family. My stomach drops. I'm the first one to find out that my Oma just had a stroke. We didn't know that's what it was at the time, but she fainted, and so she was having a stroke. I was the first one to find out that just because I had this weird spiritual intuition. Like, I knew something was wrong. I remember I was in the middle of making a pizza. I finished making that pizza really fast, and then I went to the back and I called. It was mid-rush, and I needed to call my Oma, and it was that moment that I knew something was going to change. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever had a moment like that, but it's a complete shift. Your reality just shattered. Spiritually, I felt that she saw the mental state I was in. She saw that I was going back to a person I knew that I shouldn't be going back to, because a few days before that, I had a dream that my Oma came to me, and I was having multiple dreams and multiple encounters with what I would say is angels. In a dream I had, I remember I took a nap, and it was weird because usually I don't dream during naps. Like, there's no way to really reach REM sleep. But I had this dream during a nap, and it was my Oma in her chair, and her face dissipated, and she walked through this door that turned into light. And once she walked through that door, it was just flashing, like an angel was flashing, and I was like out of my body. I've had things like sleep paralysis before where I can't move my body, but I know it's a dream, but it didn't say anything. But I woke up and I immediately went outside and I went on a walk, and I remember just feeling like disconnected. I just felt like, what does this mean? I started praying to God. I was like, what is this? And so I had that dream a few days before that actually happened, and that was enough confirmation I needed. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know if it was in a religious context. I didn't really think of it in like a Christianity sense. I didn't think of it like Jesus, right? I didn't think of that. I just thought, okay, well, I'm aware. Like, that's what it is. I'm spiritually aware of what goes on in my family. I have encounters of different things, and that's something that's happened to me like since I was like a little girl. There's been different things. This was something I couldn't deny. So we go to the hospital, and my Oma ends up dying that night. I remember I continuously kept seeing 222 on the way to the hospital. Her wristband said 222. The time she died was 12:22. And so things like that will happen where I read into things, but I'm the type of person to believe that like nothing is ever a coincidence. And so when that happened, my life really opened up for me. I stopped going back to that ex because God was saying, you need to get this, we're over this, right? Like, sometimes God will be so sick of you that like you can't even deny it. Like, you'll be praying to him about something and he'll be like, girl, for real? Like, are you seriously feeling this way? At least that's how I pray to God. Recently, I've been praying to God more formal, and I think it's really been helping me in my connection with God. But before, at this point, I would just pray to God like, what the hell is going on? And I know that's not technically correct. I started taking my Opa to church, and that's when I really started connecting with God, because we went to a Lutheran church because like my Opa is older and that's the church he's been going to for years and years and years. And so I started taking him to church every weekend or every other weekend. Sometimes my sister or my dad would take him. And so when I would do this, sometimes I would feel the word of the Lord on me, and I would feel the presence of the Holy Spirit. And even though sometimes I wouldn't necessarily all the way resonate with the message, I did resonate with the message. I started relying on God in certain ways. For example, I entered into like a situationship at one point, and I remember I prayed to God like, God, if this man isn't meant for me, take him out of my life. The next day, he was gone. Like literally the next day, I got the clarity I needed. And so I just started asking God for things. Abundance started entering my life. I started to create through my YouTube and make these videos, and my world really truly opened up. Now that I'm done dropping insane lore, getting in an environment where people believed in God helped me so much in my faith. I remember I hated my middle name because, fun fact, my middle name is Faith. And so I would always be like, my middle name is so stupid. Like, I hate my name. It doesn't make any sense. Natalie Faith, that's so ugly. Like, I literally hated it. But simultaneously, now I kind of realize, like, why my middle name is Faith, because I've had to have so much faith in God over my journey. And I'm still going to have faith in God, because even me posting this video today is me having faith in God, because in no way did I want to share with you guys certain stories of mine and share with you how I have a past, y'all. Like, God has told me so many times to be a student of life and to not act like I know things, because every single time like I act like I know what's going on, God switches it up. When I decided to get baptized, I was so nervous, because I had to deliver my testimony to the church. And I told that story of how when my Oma died, I was the one that found out, solely because God told me. God told me that I have a story to tell. You have a story to tell. I don't know who you are. I don't know what you've been through, but your story is to be told. After I got baptized, I was physically shaking. I was vibrating. I have never felt the Holy Spirit that intense ever in my life. Right afterwards, I was dripping wet and the church prayed over me and I was crying. I just didn't even know how to feel. I just felt so relieved. I just never felt something like that ever before. And there's this girl who's in my business communications class, and her name is Oma. And I remember when I enrolled in my classes this semester, when they were going through roll, it was just like a little cute thing in my mind where my professor would call a roll and I would be like, oh, her name's Oma, like that's cute. I would just remember my Oma. I'm a very sentimental person, so Oma came up to me right after I got baptized. And that night before I got baptized, I was praying to God, and I specifically said, I miss my Oma so much. I was crying to God because I was so nervous to go up and give my testimony, and I was asking, can you please allow my Oma to be with me when I get baptized? And literally, like, I'm sorry, like, that is not a coincidence. Like, a girl named Oma comes up to me after I give my testimony about how what? A girl came up to me named Oma after I gave my testimony to the church before I got baptized and said that before my Oma died, I was the one that found out just from my spiritual intuition. Like, that's the testimony I gave. And then Oma comes up to me right after. You're kidding. I never talked to this girl ever in my life. I just knew her name was Oma. And that was enough confirmation that I needed to know, like, God is real, Jesus is real, and I'm so glad I made that choice. Like, I'm so glad I made that choice despite my past, despite all the things I've been through, because it's truly a lot. God has been really speaking to me and has told me this is the right choice. You need to be in a church. You need to be with community. You need to be with other people who truly believe in God. And so I obeyed him. I went. And for anybody else who's watching this, remember that only the devil will try to stop you from becoming what you're meant to be. It's only the devil that will implant thoughts into your mind about, like, well, is God not real? Am I not meant for this? Am I invalid? Having a true connection with God, praying to God, is what actually gets you salvation. That's the only thing that allows you to experience the abundance of God, because you can't hear God if you're constantly busy, or if you're idolizing other things that are not God, if you're misinterpreting different things through tarot readings or different things like that. And not to say that those things can't make you aware of certain fears you have, but realizing not every thought is of God has helped me grow in my spiritual discernment. And again, I'm not perfect and I'm very new to my own journey, but I just know someone needed to hear this today. And so if that's you, please be sure to subscribe, give this video a like, and let me know down in the comments if you want more story times that go into things I've learned, because I have been wanting to share stories for so long, like literally so long, but I'm like in my head like, oh my god, I don't want to give these people in my life satisfaction in that way to share their story, but simultaneously I want to share these stories in more of a spiritual context and share like what they taught me, because in my personal belief, I believe that God will send people to you in order to teach you certain lessons, and those lessons are typically a reflection of certain things you've experienced and certain family traumas that you've experienced. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys next week.